I was going to love him before he even uttered a word. I learned at an early age that sometimes you just have to take what you can get. So love him I did. See, being gay or being queer and brown is often a game of proportions. It is mapping out how much space you want to leave for both your skin and sexuality, as if there isn't enough room for both identities in one body. For so long, brown people have been coaxed into believing that anything outside of the realm of straight is a white noise our ears are not attuned to listen to. So in retrospect, my parents were never homophobic, they were just deaf. It is a matter of nature, another rose to throw into the void of the inevitable. So when I decided I would love this boy, I became an element within myself. An unfathomable gust of wind tearing my home apart, and this is where it starts. This is how the queer brown child in the family adopts his survivor's guilt. How he learns to hate himself for choosing life while the razor in his bathroom whistles such an enticing tune. My decision to love this Puerto Rican man was not born out of pure desire, no matter how much at the time I swore it was. My decision to love him was born out of rebellion. He was just a cause I happened to bend my knees for at night. Each time we held hands on the sidewalk, I was making a statement. Every time I kissed him beneath an onlooking sun, I was adding bullets to my activist resume. Unfortunately, love is not always the first instinct for queer people of color. We all are not born with such a privilege. Now, no, our first instinct is usually that of protection or self-preservation, things in which we often confuse for love. This is how a response to whiteness pushes us into unsafe territories. This is how we auction off our bodies just for the sake of remaining alive. And again, unfortunately, we usually don't realize this until it is too late. Part 2, life. The day I was diagnosed HIV positive was similar to the day I experienced my first kiss. White tile floor, running faucet, feet shuffling from the other side of the door. However, instead of a stranger, those feet belonged to my mother, who was not allowed in during testing. And instead of the taste of onions, my mouth was filled with the heavy of my pulse, which was a river within itself. When the nurse proclaimed positive, like a flock of squawking birds returning home, my mouth emitted a sound that I, to this day, could not tell you the origin of. It was something so foreign to my body that even the act of trying to remember it feels like attempting to decipher a dead language. A part of you knows it was real, but at the same time, do you really? The best way I can find to describe it is that it was a mix between a bark and a plea. Like I was just a squirming, caged thing, like my ancestors before me, like the history of brown people in this country tends to be. And just then, in that very moment, peeking from behind the head of the nurse that was eagerly trying to console me was a sign that read, "Facts you should know about HIV. African Americans receive more AIDS diagnosis and experience more HIV-related deaths than any racial ethnic group in the United States." And just like that, I was stripped. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer terminally ill. I was no longer too young or too promising to die. No, just like that, I became a number. The nurse was not trying to console me out of compassion. She was just simply following procedure. I was just a character she often read about in her textbooks. I was just a question she always answered correctly on the multiple choice. I was just the A that got her here. And at 21, this was my culmination of love. A sign telling me that I was bound to make it to this room eventually. But it did not say why. Why? 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 Is it because black bodies just enjoy being at the top of lists? Maybe it's our allergies to latex. Maybe it's just individually each and every one of our own faults. That's it, because we created it, right? Just a tribal ritual gone wrong, right? We must have found it the same place we found smallpox, right? Because we did that too, right? Because it couldn't have anything to do with how insignificant we are made to feel, right? How we bury ourselves in the first stretch of flesh willing to protect us from the rain and the hate. How we will gladly play Russian roulette with our loins if it means we get to wake up next to a beating heart other than our own. And this is how the risk comes in. This is how we find ourselves plastered like a warning against a clinic's wall. And I wish I could say I was surprised by the results, but I wasn't. Because all the insecurities I carried within my queer and within my brown led me to stay with a man I otherwise would have left. But this is the true risk facing all brown people today. The risk of the compromise. Because damn, is it so easy? Granted, taking accountability for one's own actions is a supreme sign of maturity. However, allowing oneself to take into consideration a social construct of inferiority that in turn affects one's own actions is too a supreme sign of maturity. Yet, the latter is never looked upon as valid. I refuse to be apologetic for my brown any longer. It is partially the apologist in us' fault for remaining unseen. That too is reality that confronts us today. Our invisibility, whether it be within our own communities or in the media, when one of us are killed and no other queer person of color is around to see the blood pour out, does our corpse still get airtime? It doesn't. Well, nonetheless, it was being used as a marketing strategy for marriage equality. Well then, our little lifeless brown bodies will be dressed in tuxes and wedding gowns and paraded through the next gay pride. Extortion is also a reality facing queer people of color. How even our own language is being packaged and sold, all this shade, all this kiki, all this yes, picked apart, until all that is left is the white of its bones, and I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending that the LGBT community is a post-racial society, because it isn't. Go on any dating website and you will see how OkCupid has turned my black into a delicacy, had just made it easier to purchase a nigger, to experiment with some thug fantasy, and I am tired. I'm tired of the fact that I only find myself dating men of color, of a complexion lighter than mine. That the notion of dating someone of my own skin tone reminds me too much of self-love, and that is a fight I am not yet ready to lose. Part 3, future. The biggest issue facing queer people of color, or even the LGBT community, believe it or not, is not marriage equality. Go figure. Actually, how about we talk about this fight towards equality, shall we? One of the premier arguments used in this campaign is a comparison of the gay rights movement of today to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And though, yes, parallels can definitely be made between the two, the only thing that seems to puzzle me is that the sole individual allowed to be heard when making such comparisons often tend to be cisgendered white men with blonde hair and blue eyes. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like the appropriation of a history and less like equality to me. Sounds like another Starbucks being built in Brooklyn or Oakland or Baltimore or any other congested places where unfortunate brown people suffer from the lack of mocha lattes. Sounds like an indigenous people's heritage being used as a costume and paraded around a football game. You want to talk about equality? What about our trans people of color who are made to be even more invisible than me? Who are even just now, about 15 minutes later, finally finding their way into this speech. What about them? What about their health care? What about our Asia-Pacific Islanders who are constantly made and feminized as if masculinity does not sit in their bones too? Do not talk to me about marriage if you do not want to talk about me remaining alive long enough to even see the bouquet fall. No, this is not a stick-up. This is not a black boy showing you his teeth again. This is a brown body not being afraid to mourn in public. This is my way of saying, I too believe in a God, and that he loves me. And how sometimes God isn't always a he or a she. How sometimes God is just a spirit too large to be stuffed into a binary. How sometimes God is an undocumented trans immigrant with just enough pride to demand their testosterone from a country they labor for. Sometimes God is a 14-year-old girl binding her chest and refusing to wear pantyhose. Sometimes God is a 7-year-old boy playing in mommy's makeup and breaking in her heels. Sometimes God is closer than we ever give them credit for. So no, I will not rebuke the blessing of this body to appease anyone. In the book, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America, author Kesey Lehman states, the act of self-love is radical. So today, I will love myself and call it a right. I will love myself and call it Stonewall. I will love myself and call it Sylvia Rivera or Martha P. Johnson. Today, I will love myself despite the fire, despite the back alleys, despite the dark streets, despite the family members who will not love me, despite the boys who will not love me, despite the country that will not love me, despite the university that will not love me. Because what are our hands, if not a nation within themselves? What else do we really need? If each time the word faggot was swung at my head like a baseball bat is what led me to this moment, then so what? If the boys cornering me in the varsity locker room is what brought me to this moment, then so what? If being diagnosed HIV positive after only having sex with the man I loved is what brought me to this moment, then so what? I was taught at an early age that sometimes you just have to take what you can get, no matter how shattered or fractured it may be. Because anything broken into enough pieces could be used to construct a house with. And I don't know about you, but this brown boy right here intends on building. Thank you so very much.